cosmic law, which all existence serves and to which man himself must bend, has long since passed through the preliminary mystical stages represented in the old astrology, and is now simply accepted in mechanical terms as a matter of course. The descent of the Occidental sciences from the heavens to the earth, from 17th century astronomy to 19th century biology, and their concentration today, at last, on man himself, in 20th century anthropology and psychology, mark the path of a prodigious transfer of the focal point of human wonder. Not the animal world, not the plant world, not the miracle of the spheres, but man himself is now the crucial mystery. Man is that alien presence with whom the forces of egoism must come to terms, through whom the ego is to be crucified and resurrected, and in whose image society is to be reformed. Man, understood however not as I, but as thou, for the ideals and temporal institutions of no tribe, race, continent, social class, or century can be the measure of the inexhaustible and multifariously wonderful divine existence that is the life in all of us. The modern hero, the modern individual who dares to heed the call and seek the mansion of that presence with whom it is our whole destiny to be atoned, cannot, indeed must not, wait for his community to cast off its slough of pride, fear, rationalized avarice, and sanctified misunderstanding. Live, Nietzsche says, as though the day were here. It is not society that is to guide and save the creative hero, but precisely the reverse. And so every one of us shares the supreme ordeal, carries the cross of the Redeemer, not in the bright moments of his tribe's great victories, but in the silences of his personal despair. Figure 84. Earthrise, photograph, lunar orbit, A.D. 1968. Endnotes. 1. Odyssey, IV, LL. 401, 417-18, translation by S. H. Butcher and Andrew Lang. London, 1879. 2. Ibid. IV, LL. 400-406. 3. Nietzsche, Thus Spake Zarathustra, 1.22.3. The translation appears to be Campbell's own. Ed. Thank you for reading. We invite you to share your thoughts and reactions. Smidget. Bibliography note on method and organization. The primary purpose of this list is to help readers find the sources that Campbell used to write this book. It also shows the remarkable breadth of reading in mythology, ethnology, folklore, the modern and medieval literatures of Europe, psychology, philosophy, and religious scriptures of the Occident and Orient, that he incorporated into his first major independent work. The book went through many revisions between the first draft in 1944, when it was known as How to Read a Myth, and its publication by the Bollingen Foundation in 1949. A letter in the Opus archives written to Campbell's friend Henry Morton Robinson dated March 13, 1946, indicates that he had originally planned to cite fewer sources by relying heavily on the 13 volumes said The Mythology of All Races, published between 1916 and 1932 under the editorship of Lewis Gray and John McCulloch. Unfortunately, the Macmillan Company had bought the republication rights to the set, and they refused to give him permission to make quotations while they considered putting out a new edition, forcing Campbell to track down new sources to illustrate his arguments. The list comprises all of the citations in this third edition of Hero, except for a few minor ones. It includes those works from which a significant quotation is drawn, works that are cited more than once, and works that had a major effect on his thinking. Secondary citations, where Campbell cites a source, as quoted in another work, were not included, although the works in which Campbell found them are included. When the second edition was published in 1968, Campbell made most of his citations from the writings of C.G. Jung as they appeared in the collected works of C.G. Jung, while he took his citations from Freud's writings from the standard edition of the collected works of Sigmund Freud. The list is in 4 sections. The first includes those works cited by Campbell for which a particular edition is identified. Except as noted, these have been verified either from library catalogs or from books in Joseph Campbell's personal book collection, preserved at the Opus archives. The second section lists journal articles cited within the book. Most of these have not been verified. Because of the difficulty in alphabetizing canonical works, these form the third section, arranged by religious tradition. This section contains works of religious scripture cited by Campbell. The works have been further broken down by faith or tradition. Since Campbell used sources available half a century ago, I have indicated the modern forms of the titles used in the collected works of Joseph Campbell, as well, when those vary, as those used by the Library of Congress, and noted when reprints or more recent translations are available. With well-known literary works and religious canon, Campbell sometimes cited the work without giving an edition. I have listed these separately in the fourth section. My comments appear in brackets with the initials RB. Richard Buchan, Special Collections Librarian, Joseph Campbell Collection of the Opus Archives and Research Center on the campuses of Pacifica Graduate Institute, Santa Barbara, California. Main bibliographic list. Anderson, Johannes C. Maury. Life in Out. Christchurch, NZ, N.D. Apuleius, The Golden Ass of Apuleius. Translated by W. Adlington. New York, The Modern Library, N.D. Aristotle, Aristotle on the Art of Poetry. Translated by Ingram Bywater with a preface by Gilbert Murray. Oxford, Oxford University Press, 1920. Arnold, Thomas Walker, and Alfred Guillaume, eds. The Legacy of Islam. Oxford, The Clarendon Press, 1931. Bain, F.W. A Digit of the Moon and Other Love Stories from the Hindu. New York and London. G. P. Putnam's Sons, 1910. Bastian, Adolf. Ethnische Elementargedenken in der Lehre vom Menschen. Berlin. Weidmann, 1895. Bettier, Joseph. Les légendes épiques. Recherches sur la formation des chansons de geste, 3rd ed. Paris. H. Champion, 1926. Bellows, Henry Adams, ed. The Poetic Edda, Scandinavian Classics, 21/22. New York. The American Scandinavian Foundation, 1923. Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita. Translated from the Sanskrit with notes, comments, and introduction by Swami Nikhilananda. New York. Ramakrishna Vivekananda Center, 1944. Boas, Franz. The Mind of Primitive Man. New York. Macmillan, 1911. Race, Language and Culture. New York. Macmillan, 1940. Book of the Dead. C. Budge, E. A. Wallace, The Papyrus of Ani. Breasted, James Henry. Development of Religion and Thought in Ancient Egypt. New York. Charles Scribner's Sons, 1912. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, with the commentary of Shankaracharya. Translated by Swami Madhavananda, with an intro by S. Kupuswami Shastri. Translated by Madhavananda, Mayavati. Advaita Ashrama, 1934. Bryan, William Frank, and Germaine Dempster. Sources and Analogues of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Chicago. University of Chicago Press, 1941. Budge, E. A. Wallace, ed. The Gods of the Egyptians. London. Methuen, 1904. The Papyrus of Ani. Translated by E. A. Wallace Budge. New York. Putnam, 1913. Burlingame, Eugene Watson, ed. Buddhist Parables. New Haven. Yale University Press, 1922. Burton, Richard Francis. C. Thousand Nights and a Night. Callaway, Henry. Nursery Tales, Traditions, and Histories of the Zulus, in their own words, with a translation into English and notes by Canon Callaway. Springvale, Natal. J. A. Blair. London. Trubner, 1868. Campbell, Joseph. Folkloristic Commentary. Grimm's Fairy Tales, by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, pp. 833-64. New York. Pantheon, 1944. Catholic Church. St. Andrew Daily Missal, by Dom Gaspard Lefebvre OSB of the Abbey of Saint-André. Bruges, Belgium. Abbey of Saint-André, St. Paul, E. M. Lohman Company, 1943. Chavan, Edouard. Les Mémoires historiques de ces Motions. Translated by Edouard Chavan, Paris. E. Leroux, 1895. Codrington, R. H. The Melanesians, Studies in Their Anthropology and Folklore. Oxford. Clarendon Press, 1891. Colocott, E. V. Tales and Poems of Tonga. Bernice P. Bishop Museum Bulletin 46. Honolulu, Hawaii. The Museum, 1928. Kumaraswamy, Ananda Kentish. Buddha and the Gospel of Buddhism. New York. G. P. Putnam's Sons, 1916. The Dance of Shiva, 14 Indian Essays. New York. Sunwise Turn, 1924. Hinduism and Buddhism. New York. Philosophical Library, N. D. Spiritual Authority and Temporal Power in the Indian Theory of Government. American Oriental Series, V22. New Haven, Connecticut. American Oriental Society, 1942. Curtin, Jeremiah. Myths and Folklore of Ireland. Boston. Little, Brown, 1890. Dante Alighieri. The Divine Comedy of Dante Alighieri. Translated by Charles Eliot Norton. Reverend ed. 3. Vols. Boston. Houghton Mifflin and Company, 1902. Dimnet, Ernest. The Art of Thinking. New York. Simon & Schuster, 1929. Edda, Poetic. C. Bellows, Henry Adams. Edda, Prose. C. Sturluson, Snorri. Eddington, Arthur Stanley. The Nature of the Physical World. Gifford Lectures, 1927. New York. Macmillan, 1928. Edwards, Jonathan. Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. A Sermon Preached at Enfield, July 8, 2nd ed. Boston. N. P. 1742. Eliot, T.S. The Wasteland, 1922. In Collected Poems, 1909-1935. New York. Harcourt, Brace, N. D. Evans Wentz, W.Y., ed. Tibetan Yoga and Secret Doctrines, or 7 Books of Wisdom of the Great Path, according to the late Lama Kazi Dawa Samdup's English rendering. London. Oxford University Press, 1935.
Ed.
Tibet's Great Yogi, Milarepa. A biography from the Tibetan, being the Jetson Kabam or biographical history of Jetson Milarepa according to the late Lama Kazi Dawa Samdup's English rendering. London. Oxford University Press, 1928. Ferdowsi. The Shahnameh of the Persian poet Ferdowsi. Translated by James Atkinson. London, New York. F. Warren, 1886. Fletcher, Alice C. The Hacko. A Pawnee Ceremony. Bureau of American Ethnology Annual Report. Washington, D.C. Government Printing Office, 1904. Flugel, J.C. The Psychoanalytic Study of the Family, 4th ed. The International Psychoanalytical Library, No. 3. London. L. and Virginia Woolf, at the Hogarth Press and the Institute of Psychoanalysis, 1931. Fosdick, Harry Emerson. As I See Religion. New York, London. Harper and Brothers, 1932. Fraser, James George. The Golden Bough. A Study in Magic and Religion. Abridged ed. New York, Macmillan, 1922. Freud, Sigmund. Beyond the Pleasure Principle. In the Standard Edition of the Collected Works of Sigmund Freud, Volume 18, edited and translated by James Strachey et al. London. The Hogarth Press, 1955. Originally published 1920. The Future of an Illusion. In the Standard Edition of the Collected Works of Sigmund Freud, Volume 21, edited and translated by James Strachey et al. London. Hogarth Press, 1961, pp. 1-56. Originally published 1927. The Interpretation of Dreams. In the Standard Edition of the Collected Works of Sigmund Freud. Edited and translated by James Strachey et al. London. The Hogarth Press, 1953. Originally published 1900. The Interpretation of Dreams, Second Part. In the Standard Edition of the Collected Works of Sigmund Freud, Volume 5, edited and translated by James Strachey et al. London. Hogarth Press, 1953. Originally published 1900-1901. Introductory Lectures on Psychoanalysis, Part 3. In the Standard Edition of the Collected Works of Sigmund Freud, Volume 16, edited and translated by James Strachey et al. London. Hogarth Press, 1963. Originally published 1916-1917. Moses and Monotheism. In the Standard Edition of the Collected Works of Sigmund Freud, Volume 23, edited and translated by James Strachey et al. pp. 1-137. London. Hogarth Press, 1964. Originally published 1939. The Psychopathology of Everyday Life. In the Standard Edition of the Collected Works of Sigmund Freud, Volume 6, edited and translated by James Strachey et al. London. Hogarth Press, 1960. Originally published 1901. 3 Essays on the Theory of Sexuality. In the Standard Edition of the Collected Works of Sigmund Freud, Volume 7, edited and translated by James Strachey et al. pp. 123-245. London. Hogarth Press, 1953. Originally published 1905. Frobenius, Leo. Das Unbekannte Afrika. Aufhellung der Schicksal eines Urteils. Veröffentlichung des Forschungsinstituts für Kulturmorphologie. Munich. Oscar Beck, 1923. Und Afrika Sprach. Berlin. Vita, 1912. Das Zeitalter des Sonnengetz. Berlin. G. Reimer, 1904. Frobenius, Leo, and Douglas Clawdon Fox. African Genesis. New York. Stackpole Sons, 1937. Hennep, Arnold van. Les Rites de Passage. Paris. A. Norrie, 1909. Giles, Herbert Allen. A Chinese Biographical Dictionary. London. B. Corich. Shanghai. Kelly and Walsh, 1898. Ginsberg, Christian D. The Kabbalah, Its Doctrines, Development, and Literature. London. G. Routledge and Sons, 1920. Ginsberg, Louis. The Legends of the Jews. Translated by Henrietta Zold and Paul Radin. 7. Vols. Philadelphia. The Jewish Publication Society of America, 1911. Gray, Louis H., and J. A. McCullough, eds. The Mythology of All Races, 13 vols. Boston. Archaeological Institute of America, Marshall Jones Company, 1916-1932. Contents. I. Greek and Roman, by William Sherwood Fox, 1916. 2. Edic, by J. A. McCullough, 1930. 3. Celtic, by J. A. McCullough. Slavic, by Jan Mackle, 1918. IV. Finno-Ugric, Siberian, by Uno Homburg, 1927. Versus Semitic, by S. H. Langdon, 1931. V. Indian, by A. B. Keith. Iranian, by A. J. Carnby, 1917. 7. Armenian, by M. H. Ananikian. African, by Alice Werner, 1925. 8. Chinese, by J. C. Ferguson. Japanese, by Masaharu Anisaki, 1928. Ix. Oceanic, by R. B. Dixon, 1916. X. North American, by H. B. Alexander, 1916. 11. Latin American, by H. B. Alexander, 1920. 12. Egyptian, by W. M. Muller. Indo-Chinese, by J. G. Scott, 1918. 13. Complete Index to Volumes I-12, 1932. Gray, George. Polynesian Mythology and Ancient Traditional History of the New Zealand Race, as furnished by their priests and chiefs. London. J. Murray, 1855. Grimm, Jacob, and Wilhelm Grimm. Grimm's Fairy Tales. Unabridged edition. New York. Pantheon Books, 1944. Grinnell, George Bird. Blackfoot Lodge Tales. The Story of a Prairie People. New York. Scribner, 1892. Guest, Charlotte. C. Mabinogian. Gutman, Bruno. Volksbuch der Wadschäge. Sagan, Marchen, Fabeln und Schwank den Deschagenegger Nachertzelt. Leipzig. Verlag der Ewang. Luth. Mission, 1914. Harrison, Jane Ellen. Prolegomena to the Study of Greek Religion, 3rd ed. Cambridge. Cambridge University Press, 1922. Themis. A Study of the Social Origins of Greek Religion, 2nd Reverend ed. London. Cambridge University Press, 1927. Harva, Uno. Der Baum des Lebens. Suomalaisen Taideakatemian Toimetuksia, Analysis, Sarja B., Nide 16, 3. Helsinki. Suomalainen Taideakademia, 1923. Die religiösen Vorstellungen der Altischen Völker. FF Communications No. 125. Helsinki. Suomalainen Taideakademia, 1938. Hastings, James, ed. Encyclopedia of Religion and Ethics, 13 vols. New York. Charles Scribner's Sons, 1928. Hearn, Lafcadio. Japan, An Attempt at Interpretation. New York. Grosset and Dunlap, 1904. Hirth, Friedrich. The Ancient History of China to the End of the Zhou Dynasty. New York. The Columbia University Press, 1908. Homburg, Uno. C. Harva, Uno. Homer. The Odyssey of Homer. Translated by Samuel Henry Butcher and Andrew Lang, 2nd ed. London. Macmillan, 1879. Hull, Eleanor. The Cuchulainn Saga in Irish Literature, being a collection of stories relating to the hero Cuchulainn. London. D. Nutt, 1898. Hume, Robert Ernest, ed. The 13 Principal Upanishads, translated from the Sanskrit with an outline of the philosophy of the Upanishads, 2nd ed. London. New York. Oxford University Press, 1931. Jeffers, Robinson. The Rhone. Stallion. And Other Poems. New York. Horace Liveright, 1925. Jensen, Peter Christian Albrecht. Assyrisch Babylonische Mythen und Epen. Quellenschriftliche Bibliothek BD. V. I. Berlin. Ruther and Reichert, 1900. Jazauer, Ignaz. Das Buch der Trauma. Berlin. E. Roald, 1928. Johnson, Obed Simon. A Study of Chinese Alchemy. Shanghai, China. N. P. 1928. Joyce, James. Finnegan's Wake. New York. The Viking Press, 1939. A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. New York. Modern Library, 1928. Ulysses. New York. Modern Library, N. D. Joyce, Thomas Athol. Mexican Archaeology, An Introduction to the Archaeology of the Mexican and Mayan Civilizations of Pre-Spanish America. London. P. L. Warner, 1914. Jung, Carl Gustav. Archetypes of the Collective Unconscious. In the Collected Works of C. G. Jung, Volume 9, Part 1, edited by Herbert Reed et al., translated by R. F. C. Hull, pp. 3-41. Bollingen Series 20, New York, Pantheon, 1959. Originally written 1934. The Integration of the Personality. New York, Toronto, Farrar and Reinhardt, 1939. Republished, with revisions, in Volume 9, Part I, of the Collected Works. On Psychic Energy. In the Collected Works of C. G. Jung, Volume 8, edited by Herbert Reed et al., translated by R. F. C. Hull, 3-66. Bollingen Series 20, New York, Pantheon, 1960. Originally written 1928. Psychological Types, or The Psychology of Individuation, translated by H. Godwin Baines. London. K. Paul, Trench Trubner, New York, Harcourt Brace, 1946. Republished as Volume 6, of the Collected Works of C. G. Jung. Princeton, N.J. Princeton University Press, 1971. Originally written 1921. Psychology and Alchemy. In the Collected Works of C. G. Jung, Volume 12, edited by Herbert Reed et al., translated by R. F. C. Hull. Bollingen Series 20, New York, Pantheon, 1953. Originally written 1935-1936. Psychology and Religion. In the Collected Works of C. G. Jung, Volume 11, edited by Herbert Reed et al., translated by R. F. C. Hull, 3-105. Bollingen Series 20, New York, Pantheon, 1958. Originally written 1938. Symbols of Transformation. In the Collected Works of C. G. Jung, edited by Herbert Reed et al., translated by R. F. C. Hull, 2nd ed., Volume 5, Bollingen Series 20. Princeton, N.J. Princeton University Press, 1967. Originally written 1912. Kakuzo, Okakura. C. Okakura, Kakuzo. Kalevala, Kalevala, The Land of Heroes. Translated by William Forsell Kirby. Everyman's Library, London and Toronto. J. M. Dent and Sons, 1907. Kalidasa, The Birth of the War God, a Poem. Translated by Ralph T. H. Griffith, 2nd ed. London. Trubner, 1897. Edition not verified. The quotation is possibly from the 1879 edition listed in the UCLA Library Catalog. Kato, Genshi, What is Shinto? Tourist Library 8, Tokyo. Maruzan Company, Limited, 1935. Kena Upanishad, with Sanskrit text, paraphrase with word-for-word literal translation, English rendering, and comments. Translated by Sharvananda, Mylapore, Madras. Sri Ramakrishna Math, 1932. Kimmins, Charles William. Children's Dreams, London. G. Allen and Unwin, 1937. King, Jeff, Maud Oakes, and Joseph Campbell. Where the Two Came to Their Father, A Navajo War Ceremonial, 2nd ed. Bollingen Series, Volume 1 Princeton, N.J. Princeton University Press, 1969. Originally published 1943. King, L.W. Babylonian Religion and Mythology. Books on Egypt and Chaldea, Volume 4. London. K. Paul, Trench, Trubner and Company, 1899. Kingsborough, Edward King. Antiquities of Mexico. Comprising facsimiles of ancient Mexican paintings and hieroglyphics, 9. Vols. London. R. Havel, etc., 1831 to 1848. Klein, Melanie. The Psychoanalysis of Children. International Psychoanalytical Library, No. 22. London. L. N. Virginia Woolf at the Hogarth Press and the Institute of Psychoanalysis, 1932. Knight, W. F. Jackson. Hume and Gates. A reference of the Sixth Aeneid to the initiation pattern. Oxford. B. Blackwell, 1936. Koran, The Holy Koran. Text, translation and commentary. Translated by Abdullah Yusuf Ali, 2. Vols. New York. Hafner Pub. Company, 1946. Kramer, Samuel Noah. Sumerian Mythology. A Study of Spiritual and Literary Achievement in the Third Millennium, BC Memoirs of the American Philosophical Society, Volume 21. Philadelphia. The American Philosophical Society, 1944. Lang, Andrew. Custom and Myth, 2nd ed. London. Longmans, Green, and Company, 1885. Lao Tse, Lao Tzu's Tao and Wu Wei. Translated by Dwight Goddard, New York. Brentanos, 1919. Laird, John. Stone Men of Malekula, London. Chatto and Windus, 1942. Loomis, Gertrude Schoperl. Tristan and Isolde. A Study of the Sources of the Romance. Frankfurt A. M. J. Baer and Company, 1913. Mabinogion, The Mabinogion. Translated by Charlotte Elizabeth Guest Schreiber. Everyman's Library, New York. E. P. Dutton and Company, 1906. McGowan, J. The Imperial History of China, 2nd ed. Shanghai. American Presbyterian Mission Press, 1906. Mallory, Thomas. La Morte d'Arthur. Everyman's Library. London, Toronto. J. M. Dent and Sons, 1919. Mather, Cotton. The Wonders of the Invisible World. Observations as well historical as theological upon the nature, the number, and the operations of the devils. Boston, 1693. Mathers, S. L. McGregor. Kabbalah Denudata, The Kabbalah Unveiled, containing the following books of the Zohar. 1. The Book of Concealed Mystery. 2. The Greater Holy Assembly. 3. The Lesser Holy Assembly. London. Keegan Paul, Trench, Trubner and Company, 1887. Matthews, Washington. Navajo Legends. Boston, New York. Published for the American Folklore Society by Houghton, Mifflin and Company, 1897. Meyer, Joseph. Mythen und Erzählungen der Kustenbewohner der Gazelle Halbinsel, Neupommern. Munster I. W. Aschendorf, 1909. Menninger, Carl A. Love Against Hate. New York. Harcourt, 1942. Morley, Sylvanus Griswold. An Introduction to the Study of the Maya Hieroglyphs. Bureau of American Ethnology Bulletin 57. Washington. Government Printing Office, 1915. Muller, F. Max, ed. Buddhist Mahayana Texts, The Sacred Books of the East, Volume 49. Oxford. Clarendon Press, 1894.
Пяти, 1.
The Buddha Karita of Asvagosha, translated from the Sanskrit by E. B. Cowell.
Пяти, 2.
The larger Sukhavati Vayuha, the smaller Sukhavati Vayuha, the Vagrakatika, the larger Prajnaparamita Hridaya Sura, the smaller Prajnaparamita Hridaya Sutra, translated by F. Max Muller. The Amitayur Dhyana Sutra, translated by J. Takakusu.
Ed.
The Dhammapada, translated by Max Muller. The Sacred Books of the East, Volume 10. Oxford. Clarendon Press, 1881. Nelson, Ansgar. C. Reinhold, Hans Ansgar. Nivedita, and Ananda Kentish Kumaraswamy. Myths of the Hindus and Buddhists. New York. Henry Holt, 1914. O'Grady, Standish Hayes, ed. and trans. Silva Gadelica, I. 31. A collection of tales in Irish with extracts illustrating persons and places. London. Williams and Norgate, 1892. Okakura, Kakuzo. The Book of Tea. New York. Duffield, 1906. Opler, Morris Edward. Myths and Tales of the Jicarilla Apache Indians. Memoirs of the American Folklore Society, Volume 31. New York. American Folklore Society, 1938. Ovid, Metamorphoses. Translated by Frank Justice Miller. The Loeb Classical Library. London. W. Heinemann, 1933. Pallas, Marco. Peaks and Llamas. 4th ed. London. Castle, 1946. Parsons, Elsie Clues. Tewa Tales. Memoirs of the American Folklore Society, Volume 19. New York. American Folklore Society, 1926. Peake, Harold, and H. J. Fleur. Merchant Venturers in Bronze. New Haven, Connecticut. Yale University Press, 1931. The Way of the Sea. New Haven, Connecticut. Yale University Press, 1929. Perry, W. J. The Children of the Sun. London. Methuen and Company, 1923. Phillips, Robert. American Government and Its Problems. Reverend ed. Boston, New York. Houghton Mifflin Company, 1941. Pierce, Frederick. Dreams and Personality. A Study of Our Dual Lives. New York, London. D. Appleton and Company, 1931. Pinkerton, John. A General Collection of the Best and Most Interesting Voyages and Travels in All Parts of the World. 17 vols. London. Longman, Hurst, Rees, 1808. An Important Source for the Myths of Lapland and Siberia, R.B. Pollack, J. S. Manners and Customs of the New Zealanders, with notes corroborative of their habits, usages, etc. London. J. Madden, 1840. Radcliffe Brown, A.R. The Andaman Islanders, 2nd ed. Cambridge. University Press, 1933. Ramakrishna, The Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Translated by Swami Nikhilananda, New York. Ramakrishna Vivekananda Center, 1942. Rank, Otto. Art and Artist. Creative Urge and Personality Development. Translated by Charles Francis Atkinson, New York. A. A. Knopf, 1943. The Myth of the Birth of the Hero, A Psychological Interpretation of Mythology. Translated by F. Robbins and Smith Ely Jelliff. Nervous and Mental Disease Monograph Series, number 18. New York. The Journal of Nervous and Mental Disease Publishing Company, 1914. Reinhold, Hans Ansgar, ed. The Soul of Fire. Revelations of the Mystics. New York. Pantheon Books, 1944. Roheim, Geza. The Eternal Ones of the Dream, A Psychoanalytic Interpretation of Australian Myth and Ritual. New York. International Universities Press, 1945. The Origin and Function of Culture. New York. Nervous and Mental Disease Monographs, 1943. Originally published in 1942. War, Crime and the Covenant. Journal of Clinical Psychopathology Monograph Series, number 1. Monticello, N.Y., Medical Journal Press, 1945. Rossetti, Dante Gabriel, Dante and His Circle, with the Italian poets preceding him, 100, 200, 300. A collection of lyrics, ed. And trail in the original meters. London. Ellis and White, 1874. Sadananda, Vedanta-sara of Sadananda with introduction, text, English translation and comments by Swami Nikhilananda. Mayavati. Advaita Ashrama, 1931. Sahagan, Bernardino de. Historia General de las Cosas de Nueva España. Mexico, D.F. P. Robredo, 1938. Sankaracharya, Vivekachudamani of Sri Sankaracharya. Text with English translation, notes and index by Swami Madhavananda. Mayavati. Advaita Ashrama, 1932. Schoperl, Gertrude. C. Loomis, Gertrude Schoperl. Schultz, Leonard. Aus Nomland und. Kalahari. Bericht und die KGL. Preuß. Akademie der Wissenschaften zu Berlin über eine Forschungsreise im Westlichen und Zentralen Südafrika. Ausgeführt in den Jahren 1903-1905. Jenna. G. Fisher, 1907. Scott, David Clement Ruffell. A Cyclopedic Dictionary of the Manganya Language spoken in British Central Africa. Edinburgh. The Foreign Mission Committee of the Church of Scotland, 1892. Trichakrasambhara Tantra, a Buddhist Tantra. Edited by John Woodruff. Translated by Kazi Dawa Samdup. Tantric Texts, Volume 7. London. Lusick and Company, 1919. Spencer, Baldwin, and Francis James Gillen. The Arunta. A Study of a Stone Age People, 2. vols. London. Macmillan, 1927. The Native Tribes of Central Australia. London. Macmillan, 1899. Spengler, Oswald. The Decline of the West. Translated by Charles Francis Atkinson. 2. vols. New York. A. A. Knopf, 1926-1928. Steckel, Wilhelm. Fortschritt und Technik der Traumdeutung. Wien. N. P. 1935. Die Sprache des Traumas. Eine Darstellung der Symbolik und Deutung des Traumas in ihren Beziehungen zur Kranken und gesunden Seele. Wiesbaden. J. F. Bergman, 1911. Stevenson, Mrs. Sinclair. The Heart of Jainism. London, New York. Humphrey Milford, Oxford University Press, 1915. Stimson, J. F., Edwin G. Burroughs, and Kenneth Pike Emery. The Legends of Maui and Tahaki. Bernice P. Bishop Museum Bulletin 127. Honolulu, Hawaii. The Museum, 1934. Sturluson, Snorri. The Prose Edda. Translated by Arthur Gilchrist Brodeur. New York. The American Scandinavian Foundation, 1929. Suzuki, Daisetsu Taitaro. Essays in Zen Buddhism. London. Lusick and Company, 1927. Taylor, Richard. Te Ika Maui, or New Zealand and its Inhabitants. London. N. P. 1855. Thompson, Stith. Tales of the North American Indians. Cambridge, Massachusetts. Harvard University Press, 1929. Thousand Nights and a Night. A plain and literal translation of the Arabian Nights Entertainments, now entitled The Book of the Thousand Nights and a Night. Translated by Richard Francis Burton, 10 vols. Benares. Printed by the Kamashastra Society for private subscribers only, 1885. Probably the edition referred to as Bombay, 1885. Toynbee, Arnold Joseph. A Study of History. London. Oxford University Press, 1934. Underhill, Evelyn. Mysticism. A Study in the Nature and Development of Man's Spiritual Consciousness. New York. Dutton, 1911. Warner, W. Lloyd. A Black Civilization. A Social Study of an Australian Tribe. New York, London. Harper and Brothers, 1937. Warren, Henry Clark, ed. Buddhism in Translations. Cambridge, Massachusetts. Harvard University, 1896. Werner, Edward Theodore Chalmers. A Dictionary of Chinese Mythology. Shanghai. Kelly and Walsh, 1932. White, John. The Ancient History of the Maori, His Mythology and Traditions. Wellington. G. Didsbury, 1887. Wilhelm, Richard. Chinesische Volksmarchen. Jena. E. Diederichs, 1921. Windisch, Wilhelm Oscar Ernst. Die Alterische Heldensage Toin Bo Quallen. Nach dem Buch von Leinster. Irish Texte. Extraband zu Serie I bis IV. Leipzig. N. P. 1905. Wood, Clement. Dreams. Their Meaning and Practical Application. New York. Greenberg, 1931. Woodruff, John George. Shakti and Shakta, 3rd ed. Madras. Ganesh, 1929. Young, Hugh. Genital Abnormalities, Hermaphroditism and Related Adrenal Diseases. Baltimore. Williams and Wilkins Company, 1937. Zimmer, Heinrich Robert. The King and the Corpse. Tales of the Soul's Conquest of Evil. Edited by Joseph Campbell. Bollingen Series, Volume 11. New York. Pantheon Books, 1948. Maya. Der Indische Mythos. Stuttgart. Deutsche Verlagsanstalt, 1936. Myths and Symbols in Indian Art and Civilization. Edited by Joseph Campbell. Bollingen Series, Volume 6. New York, Pantheon Books, 1946. Cyrus, Werner. Ahasverus, der Ewige Jude. Stoff und Motivgeschichte der deutschen Literatur, 6. Berlin and Leipzig. W. de Gruyter and Company, 1930. Journal Articles Capus, A. Contes, Chants et Proverbs des Bassembua dans l'Afrique Orientale. Zeitschrift für Afrikanische und Oceanische Sprachen, Volume 3. 1897. Chamberlain, B. H. Koji Ki. Records of Ancient Matters. Transactions of the Asiatic Society of Japan. Volume 10, Supplement, 1883. Copy in the Opus Archive is reprinted, with different pagination, by the Asiatic Society of Japan, 1906. Kumaraswamy, Ananda Kentish. Akimkana. Self-Nodding. New Indian Antiquary, Volume 3. 1940. Reprinted in Kumaraswamy. Selected Papers, Bollingen Series, Alexics. Princeton, N.J. Princeton University Press, 1977. A Note on the Stick-Fast Motif. Journal of American Folklore, Volume 57, 1944. On the One and Only Transmigrant. Supplement to the Journal of the American Oriental Society, April to June 1944. Reprinted in Kumaraswamy. Selected Papers, 2, Metaphysics. Symbolism of the Dome. Indian Historical Quarterly, Volume 14, March 1938. Kumaraswamy, L. The Perilous Bridge of Welfare. Harvard Journal of Asiatic Studies, Volume 8. 1944. By Doña Luisa Kumaraswamy, wife of Ananda Kumaraswamy, cited as D. L. Kumaraswamy. Emery, Kenneth. The Tahitian Account of Creation by Mare. Journal of the Polynesian Society, Volume 47, Number 2. June 1938. The Tuamotuan Creation Charts by Piore. Journal of the Polynesian Society, Volume 48, Number 1. March 1939, 1-29. Espinoza, Aurelio. A new classification of the fundamental elements of the Tar Baby story on the basis of 267 versions. Journal of American Folklore, Volume 56, 1943. Notes on the origin and history of the Tar Baby story. Journal of American Folklore, Volume 43, 1930. Fork, Alfred. Kohung der Philosoph und Alchemist. Archive für Geschichte der Philosophie, Volume 41, Numbers 1-2, 1932, 115-126. Meissner, Bruno. Ein altbabylonisches Fragment des Gilgameshepos. Mitteilungen der Vorderasiatischen Gesellschaft, Volume 7, Number 1. 1902. Samony, Alfred. Die Rassenfrage in der Indienforschung. Sozialistische Monatsheft, Volume 8. 1926. Stein, Leon. Hasidic Music. Chicago Jewish Forum, Volume 2, Number 1. 1943. Canonical Works and Religious Scriptures Hindu. Campbell could not translate Sanskrit well, but he had worked closely with 3 scholars who did. At the time he was writing The Hero with 1,000 Faces, he was editing the unpublished works and lecture notes of the recently deceased Sanskrit scholar Heinrich Zimmer, died 1943, and he was also corresponding with Ananda Kendish Kumaraswamy, curator of Asian art at the Boston Museum of Fine Art. He was also helping with a translation of the Upanishads, including the commentary of the great Vedantist scholar Sankaracharya, Floruit circa A.D. 800, by Swami Nikhilananda of the Ramakrishna Vivekananda Center in New York. New York. Harper, 1949-1959. Reprinted by Dover Publications, 2003. Other translations of the Upanishads include Robert Hume's 13 Principal Upanishads, Revised Edition 1931, reprinted 1983, and Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan's The Principal Upanishads, New York, 1953, reprinted Atlantic Highlands, N.J. Humanities Press, 1992, R.B. Aranyakas. Aitareya Aranyaka, Aitareya Aranyaka. The text quoted is found in a footnote attributed to Ananda Kendish Kumaraswamy on page 48 of Heinrich Zimmer, The King and the Corpse. Brahmanas. Jaiminiya Upanishad Brahmana, Jaiminaya Brahmana Upanishad Brahmana. This Brahmana is related to the Jaiminaya Brahmana. Quotation from an unknown source. A text and translation with different wording by Hans Ortel, the Jaiminiya or Talavikara Upanishad Brahmana. Journal of the American Oriental Society, Volume 16, Number 1, 1894. Is in Campbell's book collection and was cited by Zimmer in a lecture delivered at the Oranos Conference of 1938. R.B. Mahabharata Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavad Gita. Quotations are from the Bhagavad Gita. Translated by Swami Nikhilananda, New York. Ramakrishna Vivekananda Center, 1944. Purana. Most quotations are from Heinrich Zimmer's Myths and Symbols in Indian Art and Civilization. Upanishads. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Quotations are from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Translated by Swami Madhavananda, Mayavati, Advaita Ashrama, 1934. Chandogya Upanishad, Chandogya Upanishad. Quotations are from Robert Ernest Hume, ed. and trans. 13 Principal Upanishads, Oxford University Press, 1931. Katha Upanishad, Kathapanishad, from Hume. Kausidaki Upanishad, Kausidaki Ramanapanishad, from Hume. There are few other translations of this text. Kena Upanishad, Kenapanishad. Quotations from Kena Upanishad. Translated by Swami Sharvananda, Mylapore, Madras. Sri Ramakrishna Math, 1932. Mandukya Upanishad, Mandukya Upanishad, from Hume. Mundaka Upanishad, Mundaka Upanishad, from Hume. Taittiriya Upanishad, Taittiriya Upanishad, from Hume. Buddhist Jatakas, Lives of the Buddha. Quotations are from Henry Clark Warren, ed. Buddhism in Translations, and Eugene Watson Burlingame, Buddhist Parables. Sutras. The Mahayana Sutras are translated from Sanskrit. Many translations are available, although most of these are translations from the Chinese versions, which often vary somewhat from the Sanskrit originals. The Dhammapada was translated from the Pali language, R.B. Amitayur Dhyana Sutra, Amitayur Dhyana Sutra. In Max Muller, ed. Buddhist Mahayana Texts. Dhammapada. In Max Muller, ed. and trans. The Dhammapada. Oxford. Clarendon Press, 1881. Reprinted with revisions, Woodstock, V.T., 2002. Larger Sukhavati Vyuha, Sukhavati Vyuha, larger. In Max Muller, ed. Buddhist Mahayana Texts. Prajnaparamita Hridaya Sutra, Hridaya, or Heart Sutra. In Max Muller, ed. Buddhist Mahayana Texts. Smaller Prajnaparamita Hridaya Sutra, Hridaya. In Max Muller, ed. Buddhist Mahayana Texts. Vajrachadika, the Diamond Cutter, Vajrachadika, also called the Diamond Sutra. In Max Muller, ed. Buddhist Mahayana Texts. A more recent translation by Edward Kahns was published in Buddhist Wisdom, containing the Diamond Sutra and the Heart Sutra, New York, 2001. Tantraskakrasambhara Tantra, Chakrasambhara Tantra. Quotations are from Shri Chakrasambhara Tantra, a Buddhist Tantra, edited Kazi Dawa Samdup, London, 1919. Reprinted New Delhi, 1987. Taoist. Tao Te Ching. Tao Te Ching, sometimes known as the Lao Tzu or, in the Pinyin romanization, the Laozi, after its author. Quotations attributed to Lao Tzu's Tao and Wu Wei. Translated by Dwight Goddard, New York, 1919. Jewish. Midrash Rabbah, Commentary on Genesis, Midrash Rabbah, Genesis. Campbell's source is uncertain. There is a recent translation by Jacob Neusner, Genesis Rabbah, the Judaic Commentary to the Book of Genesis, Atlanta. Scholar Press for Brown Judaic Studies, 1985. Zohar. Quotations from C. G. Ginsburg, The Kabbalah, Its Doctrines, Development, and Literature, London, 1920. Also from McGregor Mathers, Kabbalah Denudata, The Kabbalah Unveiled, which uses a different versification from the standard one. Christian. Bible. The King James Version is quoted. Catholic Daily Missal, probably St. Andrew Daily Missal, by Dom Gaspard Lefebvre OSB of the Abbey of Saint-André. Bruges, Belgium. Abbey of St. André, St. Paul, MN. E. M. Lohman Company, 1943. Gospel of Pseudo Matthew, edition uncertain. Roman Missal, edition uncertain. Islamic. Quran. Quotations match the text of the Holy Quran, text, translation and commentary. Translated by Abdullah Yusuf Ali, New York, 1946. Works cited without addition. Anthologia Graeca ad Fidem Codices, Volume 2. Apollonios of Rhodes, Apollonius Rhodius. Argonautica. Blake, William. The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. Carlyle, Thomas. On Heroes, Hero Worship and the Heroic in History. Epiphanius. Adversus Hearses, Apocryphal Gospel of Eve quoted. Euripides. The Bacchae, translated by Gilbert Murray. Flaubert, Gustave. La Tentation de Saint Antoine. Gesta Romanorum. Grimm's Fairy Tales. The Frog King. Campbell's quotations from this story do not match the text of the 1944 Pantheon edition, nor the older text of the Hunt translation. It is possible that he was translating from a German edition, R.B. Heraclitus, Fragments. Hesiod. Theogony. Irving, Washington. Rip Van Winkle. In the Sketchbook. Jeffers, Robinson. Cawdor. Copyright 1928. Kant, Emmanuel. Critique of Pure Reason. Longfellow, Henry Wadsworth. The Song of Hiawatha. Marshall. Epigrams, Loeb Library Edition. Nietzsche, Friedrich. Thus Spake Zarathustra. Plato. Symposium. Plutarch. Themistocles. Rumi. Mathnawi. Shakespeare. Hamlet. Sophocles. Oedipus Colonius. Oedipus Tyrannus. Thomas Aquinas. Summa contra Gentiles. Thompson, Francis. The Hound of Heaven. Virgil. Aeneid. Voragine, Jacobus de. The Golden Legend. No edition is given for this influential medieval compilation of the lives of saints. Campbell owned a 1925 French edition entitled Le Legende dorée, Traduite du Latin par Diodore de Wizua, Paris. Perrin, 1925. About Joseph Campbell. Over 100 years ago, on March 26 in 1904, Joseph John Campbell was born in White Plains, NY. Joe, as he came to be known, was the first child of a middle-class, Roman Catholic couple, Charles and Josephine Campbell. Joe's earliest years were largely unremarkable, but then, when he was 7 years old, his father took him and his younger brother, Charlie, to see Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. The evening was a high point in Joe's life, for, although the Cowboys were clearly the show's stars, as Joe would later write, he became fascinated, seized, obsessed, by the figure of a naked American Indian with his ear to the ground, a bow and arrow in his hand, and a look of special knowledge in his eyes. It was Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher whose writings would later greatly influence Campbell, who observed that the experiences and illuminations of childhood and early youth become in later life the types, standards and patterns of all subsequent knowledge and experience, or as it were, the categories according to which all later things are classified, not always consciously, however. And so it is that in our childhood years the foundation is laid of our later view of the world, and therewith as well of its superficiality or depth. It will be in later years unfolded and fulfilled, not essentially change. And so it was with young Joseph Campbell. Even as he actively practiced, until well into his 20s, the faith of his forebears, he became consumed with Native American culture. And his worldview was arguably shaped by the dynamic tension between these two mythological perspectives. On the one hand, he was immersed in the rituals, symbols, and rich traditions of his Irish Catholic heritage. On the other, he was obsessed with primitive, or, as he later preferred, primal, people's direct experience of what he came to describe as the continuously created dynamic display of an absolutely transcendent, yet universally immanent, mysterium tremendum et fascinans, which is the ground at once of the whole spectacle and of oneself. Historical Atlas of World Mythology, Prologue. By the age of 10, Joe had read every book on American Indians in the children's section of his local library and was admitted to the adult stacks, where he eventually read the entire multi-volume reports of the Bureau of American Ethnology. He worked on wampum belts, started his own tribe, named the Lenni Lenape, after the Delaware tribe who had originally inhabited the New York metropolitan area, and frequented the American Museum of Natural History, where he became fascinated with totem poles and masks, thus beginning a lifelong exploration of that museum's vast collection. After spending much of his 13th year recuperating from a respiratory illness, Joe briefly attended Iona, a private school in Westchester, NY, before his mother enrolled him at Canterbury, a Catholic residential school in New Milford Court. His high school years were rich and rewarding, though marked by a major tragedy. In 1919, the Campbell home was consumed by a fire that killed his grandmother and destroyed all of the family's possessions. Joe graduated from Canterbury in 1921, and the following September, entered Dartmouth College, but he was soon disillusioned with the social scene and disappointed by a lack of academic rigor, so he transferred to Columbia University, where he excelled. While specializing in medieval literature, he played in a jazz band and became a star runner. In 1924, while on a steamship journey to Europe with his family, Joe met and befriended Jiddu Krishnamurti, the young messiah-elect of the Theosophical Society, thus beginning a friendship that would be renewed intermittently over the next 5 years. After earning a BA from Columbia, 1925, and receiving an MA, 1927. For his work in Arthurian studies, Joe was awarded a Proudfoot Traveling Fellowship to continue his studies at the University of Paris, 1927-28. Then, after he had received and rejected an offer to teach at his high school alma mater, his fellowship was renewed, and he traveled to Germany to resume his studies at the University of Munich, 1928-29. It was during this period in Europe that Joe was first exposed to those modernist masters, notably, the sculptor Antoine Bourdelle, Pablo Picasso and Paul Klee, James Joyce and Thomas Mann, Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, whose art and insights would greatly influence his own work. These encounters would eventually lead him to theorize that all myths are the creative products of the human psyche, that artists are a culture's mythmakers, and that mythologies are creative manifestations of humankind's universal need to explain psychological, social, cosmological, and spiritual realities. When Joe returned from Europe late in August of 1929, he was at a crossroad, unable to decide what to do with his life. With the onset of the Great Depression, he found himself with no hope of obtaining a teaching job, and so he spent most of the next 2 years reconnecting with his family, reading, renewing old acquaintances, and writing copious entries in his journal. Then, late in 1931, after exploring and rejecting the possibility of a doctoral program or teaching job at Columbia, he decided, like countless young people before and since, to hit the road, to undertake a cross-country journey in which he hoped to experience the soul of America, and, in the process, perhaps discover the purpose of his life. In January of 1932, when he was leaving Los Angeles, where he had been studying Russian in order to read War and Peace in the original, he pondered his future in this journal entry. I begin to think that I have a genius for working like an ox over totally irrelevant subjects. I am filled with an excruciating sense of never having gotten anywhere, but when I sit down and try to discover where it is I want to get, I'm at a loss. The thought of growing into a professor gives me the creeps. A lifetime to be spent trying to kid myself and my pupils into believing that the thing that we are looking for is in books. I don't know where it is, but I feel just now pretty sure that it isn't in books. It isn't in travel. It isn't in California. It isn't in New York. Where is it? And what is it, after all? Thus, one real result of my Los Angeles stay was the elimination of anthropology from the running. I suddenly realized that all of my primitive and American Indian excitement might easily be incorporated in a literary career. I am convinced now that no field but that of English literature would have permitted me the almost unlimited roaming about from this to that which I have been enjoying. A science would buckle me down, and would probably yield no more important fruit than literature may yield me. If I want to justify my existence, and continue to be obsessed with the notion that I've got to do something for humanity, well, teaching ought to quell that obsession, and if I can ever get around to an intelligent view of matters, intelligent criticism of contemporary values ought to be useful to the world. This gets back again to Krishna's dictum: the best way to help mankind is through the perfection of yourself. His travels next carried him north to San Francisco, then back south to Pacific Grove, where he spent the better part of a year in the company of Carol and John Steinbeck and marine biologist Ed Ricketts. During this time, he wrestled with his writing, discovered the poems of Robinson Jeffers, first read Oswald Spengler's Decline of the West, and wrote to some 70 colleges and universities in an unsuccessful attempt to secure employment. Finally, he was offered a teaching position at the Canterbury School. He returned to the East Coast, where he endured an unhappy year as a Canterbury housemaster, the one bright moment being when he sold his first short story, Strictly Platonic, to Liberty magazine. Then, in 1933, he moved to a cottage without running water on Maverick Road in Woodstock, NY, where he spent a year reading and writing. In 1934, he was offered and accepted a position in the literature department at Sarah Lawrence College, a post he would retain for 38 years. In 1938, he married one of his former students, Jean Erdman, who would become a major presence in the emerging field of modern dance, first as a star dancer in Martha Graham's fledgling troupe, and later as dancer, choreographer of her own company. Even as he continued his teaching career, Joe's life continued to unfold serendipitously. In 1940, he was introduced to Swami Nikhilananda, who enlisted his help in producing a new translation of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, published, 1942. Subsequently, Nikhilananda introduced Joe to the Indologist Heinrich Zimmer, who introduced him to a member of the editorial board at the Bollingen Foundation. Bollingen, which had been founded by Paul and Mary Mellon to develop scholarship and research in the liberal arts and sciences and other fields of cultural endeavor generally, was embarking upon an ambitious publishing project, the Bollingen series. Joe was invited to contribute an introduction and commentary to the first Bollingen publication, where the two came to their father, a Navajo War ceremonial, text and paintings recorded by Maud Oakes, given by Jeff King, Bollingen series, I, 1943. When Zimmer died unexpectedly in 1943 at the age of 52, his widow, Christiana, and Mary Mellon asked Joe to oversee the publication of his unfinished works. Joe would eventually edit and complete 4 volumes from Zimmer's posthumous papers, Myths and Symbols in Indian Art and Civilization, Bollingen Series 6, 1946, The King and the Corpse, Bollingen Series 11, 1948, Philosophies of India, Bollingen Series 26, 1951, and a 2-volume opus, The Art of Indian Asia, Bollingen Series 39, 1955. Joe, meanwhile, followed his initial Bollingen contribution with a folkloristic commentary to Grimm's Fairy Tales, 1944. He also co-authored, with Henry Morton Robinson, A Skeleton Key to Finnegan's Wake, 1944, the first major study of James Joyce's notoriously complex novel. His first full-length, solo authorial endeavor, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, Bollingen Series 17, 1949, was published to acclaim and brought him the first of numerous awards and honors, the National Institute of Arts and Letters Award for contributions to creative literature. In this study of the myth of the hero, Campbell posits the existence of a monomyth, a word he borrowed from James Joyce, a universal pattern that is the essence of, and common to, heroic tales in every culture. While outlining the basic stages of this mythic cycle, he also explores common variations in the hero's journey, which, he argues, is an operative metaphor, not only for an individual, but for a culture as well. The hero would prove to have a major influence on generations of creative artists, from the abstract expressionists in the 1950s to contemporary filmmakers today, and would, in time, come to be acclaimed as a classic. Joe would eventually author dozens of articles and numerous other books, including The Masks of God, Primitive Mythology, Volume 1 to 1959, Oriental Mythology, Volume 2 to 1962, Occidental Mythology, Volume 3 to 1964, and Creative Mythology, Volume 4 to 1968. The Flight of the Wild Gander, Explorations in the Mythological Dimension, 1969, Myths to Live By, 1972, The Mythic Image, 1974, The Inner Reaches of Outer Space, Metaphor as Myth and as Religion, 1986, and 5 books in his 4-volume, multi-part, unfinished Historical Atlas of World Mythology, 1983-87. He was also a prolific editor. Over the years, he edited The Portable Arabian Nights, 1952, and was general editor of the series Man and Myth, 1953-1954, which included major works by Maya Deren, Divine Horseman, The Living Gods of Haiti, 1953, Carl Kearney, The Gods of the Greeks, 1954, and Alan Watts, Myth and Ritual in Christianity, 1954. He also edited The Portable Young, 1972, as well as 6 volumes of papers from the Eranos yearbooks, Bollingen Series 30, Spirit and Nature, 1954, The Mysteries, 1955, Man and Time, 1957, Spiritual Disciplines, 1960, Man and Transformation, 1964, and The Mystic Vision, 1969. But his many publications notwithstanding, it was arguably as a public speaker that Joe had his greatest popular impact. From the time of his first public lecture in 1940, a talk at the Ramakrishna Vivekananda Center entitled, Sri Ramakrishna's Message to the West, it was apparent that he was an erudite but accessible lecturer, a gifted storyteller, and a witty raconteur. In the ensuing years, he was asked more and more often to speak at different venues on various topics. In 1956, he was invited to speak at the State Department's Foreign Service Institute. Working without notes, he delivered 2 straight days of lectures. His talks were so well received, he was invited back annually for the next 17 years. In the mid-1950s, he also undertook a series of public lectures at the Cooper Union in New York City. These talks drew an ever larger, increasingly diverse audience, and soon became a regular event. Joe first lectured at Esalen Institute in 1965. Each year thereafter, he returned to Big Sur to share his latest thoughts, insights, and stories. And as the years passed, he came to look forward more and more to his annual sojourns to the place he called Paradise on the Pacific Coast. Although he retired from teaching at Sarah Lawrence in 1972 to devote himself to his writing, he continued to undertake 2-month-long lecture tours each year. In 1985, Joe was awarded the National Arts Club Gold Medal of Honor in Literature. At the award ceremony, James Hillman remarked, "No one in our century, not Freud, not Thomas Mann, not Levi Strauss, has so brought the mythical sense of the world and its eternal figures back into our everyday consciousness." Joseph Campbell died unexpectedly in 1987 after a brief struggle with cancer. In 1988, millions were introduced to his ideas by the broadcast on PBS of Joseph Campbell and the Power of Myth with Bill Moyers, 6 hours of an electrifying conversation that the two men had videotaped over the course of several years. When he died, Newsweek magazine noted that Campbell has become one of the rarest of intellectuals in American life, a serious thinker who has been embraced by the popular culture. In his later years, Joe was fond of recalling on how Schopenhauer, in his essay on the apparent intention in the fate of the individual, wrote of the curious feeling one can have of there being an author somewhere writing the novel of our lives, in such a way that through events that seem to us to be chance happenings there is actually a plot unfolding of which we have no knowledge. Looking back over Joe's life, one cannot help but feel that it proves the truth of Schopenhauer's observation. Robert Walter, San Anselmo, California, March 26, 2004. For more information on the works of Joseph Campbell, click here. About the Joseph Campbell Foundation. The Joseph Campbell Foundation, JCF, is a not-for-profit organization founded to preserve, protect, and perpetuate the work of Joseph Campbell by cataloging and archiving his works, developing new publications based on his work, directing the sale and distribution of his published works, protecting copyrights to his works, increasing awareness of his works by making them available in multiple digital and analog formats. Further Campbell's pioneering work in comparative mythology and religion by promoting the study of mythology and comparative religion, implementing and/or supporting diverse mythological education programs, supporting and/or sponsoring events designed to increase public awareness, donating Campbell's papers to the New York Public Library and his personal library to Opus Archive and Research Center, making JCF's website, www.jcf.org, a forum for mythologically informed cross-cultural dialogue, help individuals enrich their lives by becoming a JCF associate and receiving JCF's weekly digest, Myth Blast, and related offerings. Exploring and utilizing some of the many mythological resources available at jcf.org. Participating in conversations of a higher order forums on jcf.org. Joining in one of the various mythologically related activities that JCF periodically undertakes. For more information on Joseph Campbell and the Joseph Campbell Foundation, visit jcf.org. Acknowledgements. This edition was prepared by the Joseph Campbell Foundation, JCF, as part of the collected works of Joseph Campbell, Robert Walter, Executive Editor, David Cudler, Managing Editor. All notes marked, ed., originated with the JCF editors. It was derived from the 2008 print 3rd edition, published by New World Library. New World Library's editor was Jason Gardner. The bibliography appears courtesy of the Opus Archive and Research Center, which reserves all rights thereto. Images of C.G. Jung and Sigmund Freud appear with the permission of HIP, Art Resource, New York. Image of Franz Boas, page 13, appears with the permission of the Phoebe E. Hearst Museum and the Regents of the University of California. All other images and quotations appear with the permission of their copyright holders, except where they belong to the public domain. See the endnotes and the illustration list for sources. Image research assistance was provided by Sabra Moore, by Diana Brown, M.A., and by the associates of the JCF. Illustrations list. Figure 1. Medusa, carved marble, Roman, Italy, date uncertain. From the Rondinini Palace, Rome. Collection of the Glyptothek, Munich. Photo from H. Brunn and F. Bruckmann, Denkmäler griechischer und römischer Skulptur, Verlagsanstalt für Kunst und Wissenschaft, Munich, 1888-1932. Figure 2. Vishnu dreaming the universe, carved stone, India, circa A.D. 400-700. Dasavatara Temple, Temple of the 10 Avatars. Diogar, Central India. Archaeological Survey of India, courtesy of Mrs. A.K. Kumaraswamy. Figure 3. Seleni and Maenads, Black Figure Amphora, Hellenic, Sicily, circa 500-450 B.C. Found in a grave at Gela, Sicily. Monumenti Antichi, Pubblicati per cura della Real Accademia dei Lincei, Volume 17, Milan, 1907, Plate 37. Figure 4. Minotauromachy, Red Figure Crater, Greece, circa 470 B.C. Here Theseus kills the Minotaur with a short sword. This is the usual version in the vase paintings. In the written accounts, the hero uses his bare hands. Collection des vases grecs de M. le Comte de Lamberg, expliqué et publié par Alexandre de la Borde, Paris, 1813, Plate XXX. Figure 5. Shinto Fire Ritual, photographed by Joseph Campbell, Japan, A.D. 1956. On May 21, 1956, Campbell attended a ritual in Kyoto, Japan, conducted by a group of Yumabushi, mountain wizards. For more about this event, see Joseph Campbell, Sake and Satori. Asian Journals, Japan, Novato, CA. New World Library, 2002, pp. 119-126. Ed. Copyright. Joseph Campbell Foundation, www.jcf.org. Figure 6. The Monster Tamer, Inlaid Shell and Lapis Lazuli, Sumerian, Iraq, circa 2650-2400 B. c. The central figure is probably Gilgamesh. This is the topmost register from the sounding box plaque on an ornate lyre, found in the so-called royal tombs at Ur by Sir Leonard Woolley. Ed. Courtesy of the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology, Philadelphia. Figure 7. Sakyamuni Buddha beneath the Bodhi tree, carved schist, India, circa late 9th early 10th century A.D. Bihar, Gaya district. From the Nasli and Alice Hiramonic collection. Courtesy of the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. Figure 8. Yggdrasil, the World Tree, etching, Scandinavia, early 19th century A.D. Richard Falkard, Plant Lore, Legends and Lyrics, circa 1844, after Finnor Magnusson, The World Tree of the Edda, Edalaren og dens Oprindels, Book 3, 1825. Figure 9. Omphalos, Gold File, Thracian, Bulgaria, 4th-3rd century B.C. Part of the so-called Panagurishti treasure. Archaeological Museum, Plovdiv, Bulgaria, copyright. Eric Lessing, Art Resource, NY. Figure 10. Psyche entering Cupid's garden, oil on canvas, England, A.D. 1903. John William Waterhouse, 1849–1917, copyright. Harris Museum and Art Gallery, Preston, Lancashire, UK. The Bridgman Art Library. Figure 11. APIs in the form of a bull transports the deceased as Osiris to the underworld, carved wood, Egypt, circa 700 to 650 B.C. From an Egyptian coffin in the British Museum. In the original edition of this book, Campbell followed Budge in assigning the identity of the bull incorrectly to Osiris. APIs was the son of Hather and protected the newly deceased on the journey to the afterlife. According to Diana Brown of the University of Edinburgh, the images at the top symbolize the unification of the two lands, the lotus of Upper Egypt and the papyrus of Lower Egypt. The wavy lines at the bottom on which the bull is standing represent water. In ancient Egypt, the sky, Nut, was thought of as a watery expanse. Therefore, the API's bull is carrying the Osiris figure to the sky. The bull is identified with the creative, regenerative force through which the deceased is transfigured into Osiris, a supernatural being. Ed. E. A. Wallace Budge, Osiris and the Egyptian Resurrection, London. Philip Lee Warner, New York. G. P. Putnam's Sons, 1911, Volume I, page 13. Figure 12. Isis in the form of a hawk joins Osiris in the underworld, carved stone, Ptolemaic, Egypt, circa 1st century A.D. This is the moment of the conception of Horus, who is to play an important role in the resurrection of his father. Compare Figure 47. From a series of bas-reliefs on the walls of the Temple of Osiris at Dendera, illustrating the mysteries performed annually in that city in honor of the god. E. A. Wallace Budge, Osiris and the Egyptian Resurrection, London. Philip Lee Warner, New York. G. P. Putnam's Sons, 1911, Volume 2, page 28. Figure 13. Apollo and Daphne, carved ivory, Coptic, Egypt, 5th century A.D. Museo Nazionale, Ravenna, Italy. Copyright. Scala, Art Resource, NY. Figure 14. The Rocks That Crush, The Reeds That Cut, Sand Painting, Navajo, North America, A.D. 1943. Note the magical feather on the left. The tiny black rectangle represents the twins, carried safely through the danger. Ed. Reproduction of an original sand painting by Jeff King. From Maud Oakes and Joseph Campbell, Where the Two Came to the Father, a Navajo War Ceremonial, Bollingen Series, Pantheon Books, 1943, Plate 3. Figure 15. Virgil leading Dante, ink on vellum, Italy, 14th century A.D. Dante and Virgil entering a fortress surmounted by owls, from the Inferno, by Dante Alighieri, A.D. 1265 to 1321, copyright. Musée Condé, Chantilly, France. Girardin, The Bridgman Art Library. Figure 16. Odysseus and the Sirens, detail. Polychrome figured white Lesithus, Greece, 5th century B.C. Now in the Central Museum, Athens. Eugenie Sellers, 3 Attic Lekythoi from Eritrea, Journal of Hellenic Studies, Volume 13, 1892, Plate I. Figure 17. Ball with thunderbolt spear, limestone steel, Assyria, 15th–13th century B.C. Found at the Acropolis in Ras Shamra, ancient city of Ugarit, copyright. Musée du Louvre, The Bridgman Art Library. Figure 18. Saturn swallowing his children, detail. Oil on plaster, mounted on canvas, Spain, A.D. 1819. Francisco José de Goya y Lucientes, A.D. 1746–1828. From the Black Paintings series. Museo del Prado, Madrid, Spain. Copyright. Eric Lessing, Art Resource, NY. Figure 19. Threshold Guardians, bearing thunderbolts, painted wood, Japan, A.D. 1203, Unke, D.A.D. 1223. Congo Rikishi, Sanskrit, Vajrapani, thunderbolt handler, giant threshold guardians housed at opposite sides of the portal of the Great South Gate before Todaiji, Temple of the Great Sun Buddha. Mahavarokana, Japanese, Denichi Nyorai. Nara, Japan. Figure 20. The Return of Jason, red figure calyx, Etruscan, Italy, circa 470 B.C. From a vase found at Cerveteri, attributed to Daurus, now in the Vatican Etruscan collection, Rome. After a photo by D. Anderson. This is a view of Jason's adventure not represented in the literary tradition. The vase painter seems to have remembered in some odd haunting way that the dragon slayer is of the dragon's seed. He is being born anew from his jaws. Jane Harrison, Themis. A Study of the Social Origins of Greek Religion, 2nd Reverend ed. Cambridge. Cambridge University Press, 1927, page 435. The golden fleece is hanging on the tree. Athena, patroness of heroes, is in attendance with her owl. Note the gorgonium on her aegis, compare Figure 1. Figure 21. The Temptation of Saint Anthony, copperplate engraving, Germany, circa A.D. 1470. Martin Schongauer, circa A.D. 1448 to 1491, copyright. The Trustees of the British Museum. Figure 22. Psyche and Karen, oil on canvas, England, circa A.D. 1873. John Rodham Spencer Stanhope, A.D. 1829 to 1908. Private collection, Roy Miles Fine Paintings, copyright. The Bridgman Art Library. Figure 23. Mother of the Gods, carved wood, Egba Yoruba, Nigeria, date uncertain. Odudua, with the infant Ogun, god of war and iron, on her knee. The dog is sacred to Ogun. An attendant, of human stature, plays the drum. Horniman Museum, London. Photo from Michael E. Sadler, Arts of West Africa, International Institute of African Languages and Cultures, Oxford Press, London. Humphrey Milford, 1935. Figure 24. Diana and Actaeon, marble Metope, Hellenic, Sicily, circa 460 B.C. Actaeon devoured by his dogs as Diana looks on. Metope from Temple E at Selinus, Sicily. Museo Archeologico, Palermo, Sicily, Italy, copyright. Scala, Art Resource, NY. Figure 25. Devouring Kali, carved wood, Nepal, 18th-19th century A.D. London. Victoria and Albert, India Museum. Figure 26. Vierge ouvrante, opening virgin, polychrome wood, France, 15th century A.D. Copyright. Musée National du Moyen Age et des Thermes de Cluny, Paris. Girardin, the Bridgman Art Library. Figure 27. Creation, detail, fresco, Italy, A.D. 1508 to 1512. Michelangelo Buonarroti, A.D. 1475 to 1564, Rome, Sistine Chapel. The Creation of the Sun and Moon, post-restoration. Vatican Museums and Galleries, Vatican City, Italy, copyright. Eric Lessing, Art Resource, NY. Figure 28. Shiva, Lord of the Cosmic Dance, cast bronze, India, circa 10th-12th century A.D. Madras Museum, Madras, India. Photo from Auguste Rodin, Ananda Kumaraswamy, E.B. Havel, Victor Golubeau. Sculpture Savites de Landais, Ars Asiatica 3. Brussels and Paris. G. van Oost et C. 1921. Figure 29. The Fall of Phaethon, ink on parchment, Italy, A.D. 1533. Michelangelo Buonarroti. Jupiter, above, sits on his eagle and hurls a thunderbolt at Phaethon, son of Apollo, who had asked to drive the chariot of the sun. To save the earth, Jupiter destroyed Phaethon. Underneath, his sisters the Heliads, weeping, are changed into poplar trees. The river god Eridanus, the river Po, into whose river Phaethon fell, lies underneath. From Ovid's Metamorphoses, ed. Copyright. The British Museum. Figure 30. The Sorcerer, rock engraving with black paint fill-in, Paleolithic, France, circa 10,000 B.C. The earliest known portrait of a medicine man, circa 10,000 B.C. in the Aurignacian Magdalenian cave known as the Trois Frères, Ariege, France. Drawing by George Armstrong. From Joseph Campbell, The Flight of the Wild Gander. Novato, C.A. New World Library, 2002, Fig. 5. Figure 31. The Universal Father, Viracocha, weeping, bronze, pre-Incan, Argentina, circa A.D. 650 to 750. Plaque found at Andalgalá, Catamarca, in northwest Argentina, tentatively identified as the pre-Incan deity Viracocha. The head is surmounted by the rayed solar disk, the hands hold thunderbolts, tears descend from the eyes. The creatures at the shoulders are perhaps Imamana and Takapu, the two sons and messengers of Viracocha, in animal form. Photo from the Proceedings of the International Congress of Americanists, Volume 12, Paris, 1902. Figure 32. Bodhisattva, Temple Banner, Tibet, 19th century A.D. The Bodhisattva known as Ushnishasidhatapatra surrounded by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and having 117 heads, symbolizing her influence in the various spheres of being. The left hand holds the world umbrella, Axis Mundi, and the right the wheel of the law, Dharmakakra. Beneath the numerous blessed feet of the Bodhisattva stand the people of the world who have prayed for enlightenment, while beneath the feet of the three furious powers at the bottom of the picture lie those still tortured by lust, resentment, and delusion. The sun and moon in the upper corners symbolize the miracle of the marriage, or identity, of eternity and time, nirvana and the world, see above. The lamas at the top center represent the orthodox line of Tibetan teachers of the doctrine symbolized in this religious banner painting. Courtesy of the American Museum of Natural History, New York City. Figure 33. Kuan Yin, the Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva, painted wood, China, 11th-13th century A.D. Courtesy of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York. Figure 34. Androgynous ancestor, carved wood, Mali, 20th century A.D. Wood carving from the region of Bandiagra, French Sudan, now known as Mali, ed. Collection of Laura Hardin, New York City. Photo by Walker Evans, courtesy of the Museum of Modern Art, New York City. Figure 35. Bodhidharma, paint on silk, Japan, 16th century A.D. Bodhidharma, died around A.D. 532, known as Daruma in Japanese, was the Indian founder of Chan, Zen, Buddhism, which he brought to China. He is said to have spent 9 years seated in meditation in a cave, losing the use of his arms and legs. Zen became influential in Japan in the 13th century. From this period onward, Japanese Zen monks began painting portraits of Daruma in brush and ink as an aid to reaching enlightenment. Satori, copyright. The British Museum. Figure 36. Tea ceremony. Abode of vacancy, photograph by Joseph Campbell, Japan, A.D. 1958. Geisha and attendants serving tea, Tokyo, Japan. Campbell attended this ceremony while participating in the International Congress for the History of Religions. Ed. Copyright. Joseph Campbell Foundation. Figure 37. Lingam Yoni, carved stone, Vietnam, circa 9th century A.D. Found at Cat Tien Sanctuary, Lam Dong Province, Vietnam. Figure 38. Kali astride Shiva, gouache on paper, India, date uncertain. From a private collection. Figure 39. Isis giving bread and water to the soul, Egypt, date uncertain. E. A. Wallace Budge, Osiris and the Egyptian Resurrection, London. Philip Lee Warner, New York. G. P. Putnam's Sons, 1911, Volume 2, page 134. Figure 40. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva with their consorts, painted miniature, India, early 19th century A.D. The Hindu triad of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva with their consorts Sarasvati, Lakshmi, and Parvati. Company School, Southern India, Madras Presidency, early 19th century A.D., but pre-1828. Victoria and Albert Museum, London, Great Britain. Copyright. Art Resource, N.Y. Figure 41. The Conquest of the Monster, David and Goliath. The Harrowing of Hell, Samson and the Lion, engraving, Germany, A.D. 1471. A page from the 15th century Biblia Pauperum, German edition, 1471, showing Old Testament prefigurements of the history of Jesus. Compare Figure 50. Edition of the Weimar Gesellschaft der Bibliophilin, 1906. Figure 42. The Branch of Immortal Life, alabaster wall panel, Assyria, circa 885 to 860 B.C. Wall panel from the palace of Ashur-Nasirpal II, king of Assyria, at Kalhu, modern Nimrud. Courtesy of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York City. Figure 43. Bodhisattva, carved stone, Cambodia, 12th century A.D. Fragment from the ruins of Angkor. The Buddha figure crowning the head is a characteristic sign of the Bodhisattva. Compare figures 32 and 33. In the former, the Buddha figure sits atop the pyramid of heads. Musée Guimet, Paris. Photo from Angkor, editions, telephone, Paris, 1935. Figure 44. The Return of the Prodigal, oil on canvas, Holland, A.D. 1662. Rembrandt van Rijn, A.D. 1606 to 1669. The Hermitage, St. Petersburg. The York Project, 10.000 Meisterwerk der Malerie. DVD-ROM, 2002. Figure 45A. Gorgon's sister pursuing Perseus, who is fleeing with the head of Medusa, red figure Amphora, Greece, 5th century B.C. Perseus, armed with a scimitar bestowed on him by Hermes, approached the three Gorgons while they slept, cut off the head of Medusa, put it in his wallet, and fled on the wings of his magic sandals. In the literary versions, the hero departs undiscovered, thanks to a cap of invisibility. Here, however, we see one of the two surviving Gorgon sisters in pursuit. From the collection of the Munich Antiquarium. Adolf Furtwängler, Friedrich Hauser, and Karl Reichold, Griechische Wassenmalerie, Munich. F. Bruckmann, 1904-1932, Plate 134. Figure 45b. Perseus fleeing with the head of Medusa in his wallet, red figure Amphora, Greece, 5th century B.C. This figure and the one preceding it appear on opposite sides of the same amphora. The effect of the arrangement is amusing and lively. See Furtwängler, Hauser, and Reichold, Op. Cit. Series 3, Text. page 77, Fig. 39. Figure 46. Caradwin in the shape of a greyhound pursuing Guan Bok in the shape of a hare, lithograph, Britain, A.D. 1877. Lady Charlotte Guest, Taliesin, The Mabinogion, 2nd ed., 1877, volume 3, page 493. Figure 47. The Resurrection of Osiris, carved stone, Ptolemaic, Egypt, circa 282 to 145 B.C. The god rises from the egg. Isis, the hawk of Fig. 12, protects it with her wing. Horus, the son conceived in the sacred marriage of Fig. 12, holds the ankh, or sign of life, before his father's face. From a bas-relief at Philae. E. A. Wallace Budge, Osiris and the Egyptian Resurrection, London. Philip Lee Warner. New York. G. P. Putnam's Sons, 1911, volume 2, page 58. Figure 48. Amaterasu emerges from the cave, woodblock print, Japan, A.D. 1860. Utagawa Kunisada, A.D. 1785 to 1864. Victoria and Albert Museum, London. Art Resource, N.Y. Figure 49. Goddess Rising, carved marble, Italy, Greece, circa 460 B.C. This marble relief makes up the back panel of a seat found in 1887 on a piece of ground formerly belonging to the Villa Ludovisi. It is known for this reason as the Ludovisi throne. Perhaps of early Greek workmanship. Ed. Museo della Terme, Rome. Photo. Antique Denkmäler, Herausgegeben vom Kaiserlich Deutschen Archäologischen Institut, Berlin. Georg Reimer, Volume 2, 1908. Figure 50. The reappearance of the hero, Samson with the temple doors. Christ arisen. Jonah, engraving, German, A.D. 1471. A page from the 15th century Biblia Pauperum, German edition, 1471, showing Old Testament prefigurements of the history of Jesus. Compare Figure 41. Edition of the Weimar Gesellschaft der Bibliophilin, 1906. Figure 51. Kurzna leads Arjuna onto the battlefield. Gouache on Cardan, India, 18th century A.D. Photo by Iris Papadopoulos. Museum für Asiatische Kunst, Staatliche Museen zu Berlin, Berlin, Germany. Bildarchiv Preußischer Kulturbesitz, Art Resource, N.Y. Figure 52. The Cosmic Lion Goddess, holding the sun, single-leaf manuscript, India, 18th century A.D. Courtesy of the Pierpont Morgan Library, New York City. Figure 53. The Cosmic Woman of the Jains, Gouache on cloth, India, 18th century A.D. Rajasthan. Jaina world image in the form of a great goddess. Figure 54. The Fountain of Life, paint on wood, Flanders, circa A.D. 1520. Central panel of a triptych by Jean Bellegambe, of Douai. The assisting female figure at the right, with the little galleon on her head, is Hope. The corresponding figure at the left, Love. Courtesy of the Palais des Beaux-Arts, Lille. Figure 55. The Aztec Sun Stone, carved stone, Aztec, Mexico, A.D. 1479. Tenochtitlan, Mexico. Museo Nacional de Antropología y Historia, Mexico City, DF, Mexico. The Bridgman Art Library. Figure 56. The Cosmic Woman of the Jains, detail of cosmic wheel, gouache on cloth, India, 18th century A.D. This is a detail of the center of Figure 53. About this image, Campbell has this to say. At the level of the waist of the great cosmic being. The passage of time is marked by the ever-returning cycle of 12 stages already reviewed, the incarnations through which we all have passed many times and are still passing. Joseph Campbell, Oriental Mythology, The Masks of God, Volume 2. New York. Arcana, 1991, page 225. For Campbell's extended exploration of Jain cosmology, see Oriental Mythology, pp. 218 to 234. Ed. Figure 57. The Macroprosopos, engraving, Germany, A.D. 1684. Christian Nor von Rosenroth, Kabbalah Denudata, Frankfurt am Main, 1684. Figure 58. Tangaroa, producing gods and men, carved wood, Rurutu Island, early 18th century A.D. Polynesian, from the Tubuai, Austral, group of islands in the South Pacific. Courtesy of the British Museum. Figure 59. Tuamotwan creation chart, below, the cosmic egg. Above, the people appear and shape the universe, Tuamotua, 19th century A.D. Kenneth P. Emery, The Tuamotwan Creation Charts by Piore, Journal of the Polynesian Society, Volume 48, Number 1. March 1939, page 3. Figure 60. The separation of sky and earth, Egypt, date uncertain. A common figure on Egyptian coffins and papyri. The air god Shu Heka separates Nut and Jeb at the order of Ra, who wished to keep the incestuous twins apart. This is the moment of the creation of the world. F. Max Muller, Egyptian Mythology, The Mythology of All Races, Volume 12, Boston. Marshall Jones Company, 1918, page 44. Figure 61. The Murder of Ymir, Lithograph, Denmark, A. D. 1845. Lorenz Froelich, 1820 to 1908. Figure 62. Chaos Monster and Sun God, carved alabaster, Assyria, 885 to 860 B.C. Wall panel from the Palace of Ashur-Nasiripal II, 885 to 860 B.C. King of Assyria, at Kalhu, modern Nimrod. The god is perhaps the national deity, Asur, in the role played formerly by Marduk of Babylon and still earlier by Enlil, a Sumerian storm god. Photo from an engraving in Austin Henry Layard, Monuments of Nineveh, 2nd Series, London. J. Murray, 1853. The original slab, now in the British Museum, is so damaged that the forms can hardly be distinguished in a photograph. The style is the same as that of Figure 42. Figure 63. Namu shapes Pharaoh's son on a potter's wheel while Thoth marks lifespan, Papyrus, Ptolemaic, Egypt, circa 3rd 1st century B.C. E. A. Wallace Budge, The Gods of the Egyptians, London. Methuen and Company, 1904, Volume 2, page 50. Figure 64. Edshu the Trickster, carved wood, cowries, and leather, Yoruba, Nigeria, 19th early 20th century A.D. Private collection, Paul Freeman. The Bridgman Art Library. Figure 65. Lizolteotl giving birth, carved aplite with garnet inclusions, Aztec, Mexico, late 15th early 16th century A.D. Photo, after Hammy, courtesy of the American Museum of Natural History, New York City. Figure 66. Nut. The sky gives birth to the sun. Its rays fall on Hather in the horizon, love and life. Carved stone, Ptolemaic, Egypt, circa 1st century B.C. The sphere at the mouth of the goddess represents the sun at evening, about to be swallowed and born anew. From the so-called Chapel of the New Year in the Temple of Hather, Dendera, Egypt. Built circa 1st century B. Circa. Ed. E. A. Wallace Budge, The Gods of the Egyptians, London. Methuen and Company, 1904, Volume I. Page 101. Figure 67. The Moon King and His People, rock painting, prehistoric, Zimbabwe, circa 1500 B.C. Prehistoric rock painting, at Diana Vow Farm, Rusapi District, South Rhodesia, modern Zimbabwe. Ed. Perhaps associated with the legend of Mwetsi, the Moon Man. The lifted right hand of the great reclining figure holds a horn. Tentatively dated by its discoverer, Leo Frobenius, circa 1500 B.C. Courtesy of the Frobenius Institute, Frankfurt am Main. Figure 68. Kodlikyu of the serpent woven skirt, Earth Mother, carved stone, Aztec, Mexico, late 15th century A.D. Her head is formed from the facing heads of 2 rattlesnakes. Around her neck is a necklace of hearts, hands, and a skull. One of a pair of colossal statues which stood in the courtyard of the Great Temple at Tenochtitlan. Excavated in 1824 in Main Plaza, Mexico City. Museo Nacional de Antropología y Historia, Mexico City, DF, Mexico. Werner Foreman, Art Resource, NY. Figure 69. The Chariot of the Moon, carved stone, Cambodia, circa A.D. 1113 to 1150. Bas-relief at Angkor Wat. Photo from Angkor, Editions, Telephone, Paris, 1935. Figure 70. Pharaoh's Daughter Finding Moses, Detail, Oil on Canvas, England, A.D. 1886. Edwin Long, 1886. City of Bristol Gallery. The York Project, 10.000 Meisterwerk der Malerie. DVD-ROM, 2002. Figure 71. Kurzna holding Mount Govardhan, color on paper, India, circa A.D. 1790. Attributed to Mola Ram, 1760 to 1833. Note that Indra is visible on his elephant in the upper left. Ed. Smithsonian Institute Asia Collection. Figure 72. Paleolithic petroglyph, carved rock, Paleolithic, Algiers, date uncertain. From a prehistoric site in the neighborhood of Teot. The cat-like animal between the hunter and the ostrich is perhaps some variety of trained hunting panther, and the horned beast left behind with the hunter's mother, a domesticated animal at pasture. Leo Frobenius and Hugo Obermeier, Hadskra Maktuba, Munich. K. Wolf, 1925, Volume 2, Plate 78. Figure 73. The pharaoh Narmer slays a defeated foe, carved schist, Old Kingdom, Egypt, circa 3100 B.C. The Narmer palette, reverse. A late pre-dynastic schist ceremonial palette. Pharaoh Narmer is shown wearing the white crown of Upper, Southern, Egypt, subduing Lower Egypt. Narmer's rectangular cartouche sits on top of the palette. From Hierakonpolis, Com El Amar. Egyptian Museum, Cairo, Egypt. Eric Lessing, Art Resource, NY. Figure 74. Young Maize God, carved stone, Mayan, Honduras, circa A.D. 680 to 750. Fragment in limestone, from the ancient Mayan city of Copan. Courtesy of the American Museum of Natural History, New York City. Figure 75. Oedipus plucking out his eyes, detail, carved stone, Roman, Italy, circa 2nd-3rd century A.D. Detail of a relief on a Roman mausoleum from Neumagen Rheinisches Landesmuseum, Trier, Germany. Eric Lessing, Art Resource, NY. Figure 76. Death of the Buddha, carved stone, India, late 5th century A.D. Ajanta Caves, Cave number 26, Chaitya, Maharashtra, India. Vanni, Art Resource, NY. Figure 77. Autumn, Death Mask, Painted Wood, Inuit, North America, date uncertain. From the Kuskokwim River District in southwest Alaska. Courtesy of the American Indian High Foundation, New York City. Figure 78. Osiris, Judge of the Dead, Papyrus, Egypt, circa 1275 B.C. Behind the god stand the goddesses Isis and Nephthys. Before him is a lotus, or lily, supporting his grandchildren, the 4 sons of Horus. Beneath, or beside, him is a lake of sacred water, the divine source of the Nile upon earth, the ultimate origin of which is in heaven. The god holds in his left hand the flail or whip, and in his right the crook. The cornice above is ornamented with a row of 28 sacred uroi, each of which supports a disc. From the Papyrus of Hunefer, Thebes, Egypt 19th dynasty, around 1275 B, circa. Ed. E. A. Wallace Budge, Osiris and the Egyptian Resurrection, London. Philip Lee Warner, New York. G. P. Putnam Sons, 1911, Volume I, page 20. Figure 79. The serpent Keti in the underworld, consuming with fire an enemy of Osiris, carved alabaster, New Kingdom, Egypt, 1278 B. C. The arms of the victim are tied behind him. 7 gods preside. This is a detail from a scene representing an area of the underworld traversed by the solar boat in the 8th hour of the night. From the so-called Book of Pylons, also known as the Book of Doors. This image is taken from the sarcophagus of Seti I. Ed. E. A. Wallace Budge, The Gods of the Egyptians, London. Methuen and Company, 1904, Volume I, page 193. Figure 80. The doubles of Ani and his wife drinking water in the otherworld, Papyrus, Ptolemaic, Egypt, circa 240 B.C. From the Papyrus of Ani. E. A. Wallace Budge, Osiris and the Egyptian Resurrection, London. Philip Lee Warner, New York. G. P. Putnam Sons, 1911, Volume 2, page 130. Figure 81. World End. Rain Serpent and Tiger Claw Goddess, ink on tree bark paper, Mayan, Central America, circa A.D. 1200 to 1250. From a facsimile copy, 1898, American Museum of Natural History, New York. Figure 82. Ragnarok. Fenrir the Wolf. Devouring Odin, carved stone, Viking, Britain, circa A.D. 1000. The Andreas stone with a relief depicting a scene from the legendary Norse poem Ragnarok, Doomsday of the Gods, in which the god Othin is eaten by the wolf Fenrir. The raven perches on Othin's shoulder. Viking, from England, Isle of Man, Manx Museum, Isle of Man, Great Britain. Werner Foreman, Art Resource, NY. Figure 83. Wrestling with Proteus, carved marble, France, A.D. 1723. Aristaeus wrestling with the transformative sea god Proteus. Sebastien Slots, A.D. 1655 to 1726. Palais de Versailles, France. Figure 84. Earthrise, photograph, lunar orbit, A.D. 1968. Taken by Apollo 8 crewmember Bill Anders on December 24, 1968, showing the Earth seemingly rising above the lunar surface. Note that this phenomenon is only visible from orbit around the Moon. Because of the Moon's synchronous rotation about the Earth, i.e., the same side of the Moon is always facing the Earth, no Earthrise can be visible from the surface of the Moon. This image had a profound impact on many who saw it, Joseph Campbell among them. For Campbell's thoughts on the mythic import of this image, see Thou Art That. Transforming Religious Metaphor, Novato, CA. New World Library, 2002, pp. 105 ff. Ed.